Good afternoon. This is a special edition of R622 coming to you from my man cave in the basement of the Bonk mansion. This is week 12 of R622, fall of 2025. It's special for several reasons. Today was the first day of snow. Can you believe it? On November 10th in Bloomington, it snowed today. We call this climate change or something like that, right? But it's melting fast. My dog loved it. Oliver loved it. Second reason, it's a rarity. We have an afternoon session, late afternoon. We have two sessions today. We have one with Dr. Meina, my former advisee here at Indiana University. And we have a second session at 6 p.m. with Dr. Christopher Foley, who's in charge of online learning for the entire IU campus and system, in effect. And he'll give us some details about the growth of IU that's been subtle and sort of hidden from view from the rest of the world, but it's mounting, it's growing, and the president of IU is funding it significantly to make an IU be a leader in it. And IU has been a leader in terms of having a regional conference related to online learning for about a decade or so. So IU has been at the forefront of change in online learning, although it did not as quickly embrace fully online learning within our arts and sciences college. It did in our business school, it did in our education school, it did in our music school to some degree, now public health, but not as much within the liberal arts or arts and sciences, but it is now. So we'll hear a little bit about that in the follow-up. We'll get a break between the two sessions, probably at least a half-hour break between the two sessions. And Omida, if you could help me admit people in as they pop in here in the screen at the top, I'm letting them in, but if you could help as well. So we have Dr. Meina with us from Wayne State University. And so what makes this triply significant is this may be the first time that she's come on 622. She's been a guest in several of my classes and actually was chatting with me. She says, "Oh, I would love to come to your class." I didn't even ask her. She volunteered to come to the 622 class. So she wanted to be here. And I was thinking, in weeks 11 and 12, we talk a lot about learning environments in technology spaces, online learning, blended learning, and that kind of thing. The articles are related to the psychology of online learning and how to create online learning environments. I thought, well, Meina could kind of give us kind of a little bit of research and different strands that she's done. I know different work that she's done. We've done research on MOOCs and open education together. She's not in these books, but this is the area that she and I have been studying for a long time, since 2015, when she arrived at Indiana University from Beijing Normal. Well, she was at another university between Beijing Normal, her master's university. She was at Foreign Language University in Beijing. But Meina's been studying educational technology and online learning for a long time. It's not nearly 2 decades, but maybe it is nearly 2 decades, Meina. You think about your undergraduate degree and when you started that. And Meina and I have a book, my most recent book in 2022, Transformative Teaching Around the World, Stories of Cultural Impact, Technology Integration, and Innovative Pedagogy. This is a book based on my course, R546, on instructional strategies for creative thinking and critical thinking. We had some 45, maybe, chapters in this book, of which all of them were written by either a former dean or current dean, the opening and ending, or former students of that class who've gone back to their countries, to China, to Thailand, to Uzbekistan, to Kazakhstan, and implemented the ideas from the class. So every chapter is like 1,000 words on how to use the ideas. Omida was in that class, how to use the ideas from this book and how they have used them and implemented them. It's kind of a storybook, if you will. And we fortunately got an award from ACT a few years ago for this. If you looked at Meina's resume, you'll see that she's gotten awards for many things since she left IU. She graduated in 2019 and left in the end of July in 2019 and has been at Wayne State University up in Detroit since that time. She lives in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and she enjoys that lovely places like Bloomington a lot. She's won the Early Career Award from the Online Learning Consortium. She's won an early career award from the U.S. Distance Learning Association. She just got a kind of an early career award or distinguished alumni award early in the career at IU School of Ed in Bloomington. She just came to Bloomington a month ago, about 5 weeks ago. It was, we had an event at the Indiana Memorial Union, and I saw her there. She's published a lot, dozens and dozens of articles since graduating, 60 something, in top-notch journals, including the British Journal of Ed Tech, Educational Technology Research and Development, ETR&D, Journal of Education and Computing Research, Journal of Computing and Higher Ed, International Review of Research in Open and Distance Learning, a lot of the top choice journals, Internet and Higher Education as well, and I could go on and on. She's found a way in which to be highly productive early in a career that I've not seen the likes of before. And so we can ask about that, but most of the topic today will be about online learning and her research. She's got 2 studies that she'll summarize for us that she has done. And I've sent you the slides for it as well. I just think if there's anything else I want to say before we get going. Here, if you look at her bio, you'll see that she's received a lot of awards at Wayne State and other places. She teaches courses in emerging technologies like I do, instructional design, the history and issues and trends in educational technology. She's interested in STEM-related research and works with faculty in the chemistry and engineering departments at Wayne State in joint interdisciplinary collaborative efforts, including those related to robotics and other chatbots and other kinds of things. And she could talk about that today. What I told Meina that we'd start with is just a little 5-minute overview of our research on self-directed online learning. And we've actually done a series of studies related to SDL, but I've queued up in the slides just moving to the end of that and more of our guidelines related to self-directed online learning and some of the work that I've done since she's left here at Indiana, creating an instrument related to self-directed online learning, which I've presented to all of you in week 3 or week 4 of this class. So I don't need to rehash all of this, but briefly stated, we'll go through it. Then Meina will present her research on online learning. Before I go to those slides, Meina, do you want to add anything to what I've mentioned or welcome the students in any kind of way? Do you want to make any statement before we get into those slides?
I just want to say thanks to Dr. Bonk for the nice introduction and for your support when I was a doctor student and also right now when I'm a faculty at Wayne State University. Without your support, I couldn't achieve what I have achieved. It's really great honor to have a conversation with all of you here. If you have any questions, I hope we can have more conversation. So.
Yeah, Meina, I don't think I put your email address in the one page that I sent to everyone. Could you put in the chat window your email, your preferred email contact? So if anyone has a question for you, they can follow up with you. Okay. So let me go to those slides that I've got here. And so we really need to create a culture of self-directed learning because we've moved from an age of information scarcity, educational resource scarcity to resource abundance. And with that resource abundance comes responsibilities to self-direct one's learning to some degree. Now, that doesn't mean that one is without a teacher, without an instructor, without a mentor, or without a tutor in those environments. That just means that there's been a shift to some degree to having students self-direct their learning and enables for more satisfaction. And we'll go back to those slides. More self-confidence, more personal identity, initiative, all these positive things that we want. And we can structure these environments so as to give students more control, more responsibility, more autonomy. As long as we provide feedback in these systems, as long as we give them a sense of knowing how far they've progressed in this work. And Meina and I, in our research, have relied a lot on Randy Garrison's model from the University of Calgary and looking at 3 parts of self-directed learning. one's self-monitoring of the learning environment, one's self-management of what they have learned, and the motivational aspects of that environment. That is an SDL model that's existed since, late 90s, like 1997, that people have relied upon. But there's an alternative model, and that's a model from Lillian Song and Janet Hill at the University of Georgia. Janet Hill is, and Lillian Song's at Towson University in Maryland now. She must have been her student, must have been Janet's student. And my team has looked at this model and made some changes to the model based on our research since Meina left on online language learning. And it's complex. There's a lot of aspects that need to be considered in one's self-directed learning environments, including the prior knowledge of the learners and their strategy uses, the resource uses, and other things, and the design of the tasks, the design of the resources, the possibilities for peer collaboration and so forth in those environments. And my team has gradually refined their model into one that looks like this. Now, this is a little fuzzy and hard to read. I've gotten my son in the past weeks to build a better model. Maybe I'll go fetch it somewhere and put that up before we're done here. I've got a better view of this that I can share with all of you. But basically, my team that's worked in online language learning has created 5 primary constructs in a new instrument we call the PASDA, the Personal Attributes for Self-Directed AI Learning, which I think I presented in weeks 3 or 4, which looks at learner attitudes, learner strategy use, motivation, self-efficacy, and resource use. So we've expanded Garrison's model from 3 components basically to 5 components. And this is the first validated instrument for measuring personal attributes in a AI integrated self-directed learning environment. And we did this with a population of nearly 700 global language learners. So we got reliability and validity for this. Must have been the end of spring. And by maybe it was a little earlier than that. Maybe it was last winter. And by July, that got published in a journal called Systems, which is a very good journal. It's a Social Science Citation Index journal. And that was in July. In August, that article received an award. Basically, this effort received an award in China. So we got an innovation research prize for this award for this journal article. And it has items on it, such as cognitive strategies. I focus on what I need when learning from ChatGPT. I set learning goals before using ChatGPT. I stay updated with the latest features, updates, and best practices for using ChatGPT. I think carefully about the answers that it gives me, and then metacognitive strategy. I compare ChatGPT responses to other information sources to ensure they're correct. I check and think about the answers that ChatGPT gives me to ensure that they make sure that they're correct and make sense. I think about how well I used ChatGPT before, and then I maybe redo it and use it better next time. So this is some of the instruments. These are some of the items of the 44 items. These are 11 of the items that are in that particular scale. And they include, as I said, self-efficacy, the learner's belief in their ability to succeed in that environment, to overcome the challenges and obstacles that lay in their way with the use of generative AI tools, or attitudes, an individual's mindset, perspective, disposition towards using Gen AI as a learning tool. So a lot of these are attitudinal, and then motivation, both extrinsic and intrinsic motivation, and their learner engagement, persistence to achieve their goals. Strategy use, employing effective approaches and techniques for interacting with Gen AI. And then resource use, utilizing the available information, references, tools within that environment to support and enhance their learning. So it's got to do with the strategy and resource use, as well as the attitudes and self-efficacy and motivational components. And some on the right-hand side, it goes through some key components of each of those. So this is kind of the newer model of that PASDA, looking at one's planning, evaluating, monitoring, and adapting within that setting. Well, Maine and I published an article 3 years ago that came out finally. It was in press and then it was online first. They call these things online first today, but officially didn't have a page numbers until like a month ago or a couple of weeks ago. And in this article, we talk about the strategies for self-directed online learning. Now, there's one article in um, East China Normal University Review of Education, and there's a second article in a journal called Open Learning, where we lay out the strategies for self-directed learning, including having flexible timelines, including having progress bar indicators, including having reflection questions embedded in what the learner is doing at a particular time, including having estimated timeframes or how long it will take to complete things, including building a learning community so that one can ask questions of others and get some support. These are some of the strategies or components. Progress bars are a key thing. Flexible timelines are key things. Estimated timeframes are a key thing for learner success. There are more than that. We expand these 10 to 15 in the article that Meina and I wrote in Open Learning, the Journal of Open and Distance Learning. So the first article in ECNU Review of Ed, what I first authored, this again took 3 years to come out after coming out online first. This one too, it's mind-boggling how long sometimes things take and how quick other things take. But we expanded this into 15 items in looking at self-directed online learning, including embedding quizzes for self-assessments, including encouraging learners to make plans and set learning goals, having task overviews, gamifying the learning environment, and application exercises to apply it. Then from that, we create a checklist. And this checklist might help all of you as instructional designers or future instructional designers to think about how to design flexible, blended, and fully online courses to help learners self-direct their learning. So in this self-directed checklist are items related to course structure and course overview. There are items related to time management and course reminders, and time management cues, and content chunking. There are items related to course resources, including the access to those resources and the conceptual linkage between resources. Earlier, I mentioned time management. There also are items related to estimated timeframes, related to progress bars. And then there are additional items in here related to course flexibility and course options, and then interactive and engagement pedagogy, and learner interaction variables, instructional tactics. And as you look on the right side, we get into application questions, reflection questions, and then system support, AI support for feedback, AI support in terms of giving them feedback when and if they need it. And then automated guidance, maybe every once in a while, just momentarily prompting the learner, or if they seem to be confused, to give them some hints or advice along the way, those kinds of things. There's 24 different items to keep track of in this, basically a checklist of sorts. So there's that. And I'll stop at that and just have Meina just add to what I just said in terms of SDL and what our research has shown.
I think Dr. Bang has already covered everything that we have done related to how to design instruction to help students self-direct learning in massive open online courses. I think there's a question here in the chat window about how do we know that students are ready to learn before their position to begin their learning. I think the strategies that Dr. Bonk mentioned could be helpful to help students develop self-direct learning skills, but still self-direct learning are primarily used in adult education, like not primarily used in K-12 that often. In K-12, we typically use self-regulated learning that has facilitation with teachers. This is just thing that I want to add.
If I could add, my question's a little more specific, and thank you for entertaining it. So we know from the literature that the difference between novices and experts when they're learning something new is that novices will attend to the superficial because they're not ready for that the connections that we would want them to make in mastery. The problem we're having, right, the problem we have with moving from physical to virtual, especially the asynchronous, now we're talking asynchronous, is that we don't know if students are ready to make that connection. So we don't know if they have, we don't, they all come and we think of situated learning. Okay. And so that there's whether the novices are ready to learn. Our first order of businesses should be to help students get ready to learn what they're going to learn. And so without the guidance, the scaffolded guidance of the expert, okay, the instructor, hopefully, is that students are left to their own devices to think that their experiences, that they are positioned ready for this processing and working memory, for that consolidation. So it's very easy if students get off on the started of not understanding that, of assuming that they're making a connection, the connection they need to make between their existing knowledge and the knowledge of the topics they're going to learn. We got to think about this in direction of projectiles, whether it be a arrow or a bullet. The very subtle, at the very beginning, even the little incremental adjustment, we know that when they're left to their own devices, that they're going to end up potentially miles from that target. And so we like to think that what we do is we err on the side of letting students kind of get off on a rough start. And then what we do in the classroom when that happens is we see instructor resources come up that they have to kind of help compress them on the trajectory to help them contain so that they're at least heading in that right direction. And so and what I like to think about is I've got a lot of great ideas and we got a lot of great ideas about self-direction. But if we're not attentive to what happens with information processing and what we know about early on in situated learning, if you're incorrect in if I don't want to say incorrect in your situation, if you're incorrect, if your situation is vague, if you're situatedly vague, then left to my own devices, how am I going to know? We're going to have to devise systems that can read this. And when you go into the literature to find out those responsive learning environments are expensive. And I don't think we have many universities that are in the position to spend the money and resources on that. So my concern is, are we settling with close enough? And are we shedding the more important elements that we know from learning neuroscience about readiness, and we're thinking just, do they have computer efficacy? Do they have metacognitive abilities? Well, we got metacognitive abilities. Is that what I'm answering? Is it, what are we doing about that?
So Gary, I think not only, I think universities do have the resources. They just don't have the wherewithal and they don't have the attitude towards really helping learners.
That's the
the
resource
game.
I'm talking about. Thank you. I'm thinking about the attitudinal resources. You're right. I should clarify that it's not just the primary resources like money and physical, but
Yeah.
thank you. You just hit on it is are we ready for that? So I think the work you're doing to show that this is where we need to go is great.
Mhm.
I'm hoping more people are stepping up and saying, but let's not forget that we don't want to play with close enough,
Yeah,
because when
keep
you're
in
close
mind,
enough at the beginning,
yeah,
divergence is great at the end.
yeah. You cannot all of a sudden give people a set of guidelines or an instrument without doing the hard work and heavy lifting early on. So there's a series of studies that went into this. Our studies of Duolingo, our studies of MOOCs, Meina's study or dissertation interviewing instructors, and she did a second dissertation within her dissertation interviewing students on how they self-direct their learning. But we interviewed instructors and how they set up the environments to self-direct. And a series of studies. We had 3,000, Meina and I collected 3,300 MOOC instructor names and emails. We sent them a survey based on that, and then interviewed and did focus group and did other things. So this accumulates over time, is my
Okay.
point. And that
Yeah.
the universities are not really at the game to help learning out. they're at the game to push people through and give them degree certificates and make money from it. I've come to the conclusion there's a lack of caring in university settings today, for the learner and for the instructor as well. They're so focused on the business model that they have to push people through a set of cogs and wheels and give degrees in the end that subtle things like providing if scaffolded support is off their radar, to be honest with you. And so we need all of us to push and do work in similar kinds of concerted efforts so as to change the attitudes about what learning is, what teaching is, and what we're in this for as human beings. I'm on my soapbox for a minute. Sorry about that, but this is part. Everyone, if people could do other parts and we all work together, I think there could be an improved awareness, and then from awareness can come use and advocacy and other things. But we need awareness first. We need to understand what's going on first. Meina, you want to jump in here and answer it maybe from a different perspective?
Yeah, I think Gary really asked a very wonderful question that worth us to reflect on and also keep like researching on it. I think there's some theoretical what you can find, and also there's some practical logistical situation that whether we have the institutional support resources for that. Yeah, I
Arpita,
agree what Dr. Bong said.
Arpita.
Hi. My question is about motivation. I saw in the diagram that you showed about intrinsic and extrinsic driver of engagement in AI assisted self-directed learning. But overall, I was just thinking about Janio's article, or I don't know if I pronounced it correctly. He talked a lot about motivation may be less fixed learner trait, and he emphasized on learning conditions, that if you design the conditions effectively, then you will see learner success. So how should we interpret motivation in this context? And I'm reflecting as a healthcare, I work in healthcare where healthcare workers are overloaded, they're burnt out. So when they are given self-directed options, what conditions should we set? And if motivation is really an important trait, how do we kind of engage with it? So yeah, that's my question. Thank you.
Meina, you have an idea there?
I think this is a wonderful question. In the Garrison's model of there's a motivation is one of the important element, and then they kind of there's some theory divide the motivation with intrinsic and extrinsic, or you can in Garrison's model they divide it into interim motivation and task motivation. So in the interim motivation, typically at the beginning of the learning process, you can state the goal of the learning, maybe the course, the goal of the course, and also how this course be related to their current or future job, like make the learning goal of this course more kind of meaningful for them. That's one of the strategies based on our study with Dr. Bonk. And there some task motivations, like after students enrolled in the course, then there's some strategy like you can use multimedia resources to engage learners, provide immediate feedback so that they get motivated, know that their teachers, instructor who care about their learning. Yeah, there are very different strategies once students in the course how to keep them motivated in the MOOC environment. Maybe Dr. Bonk want to add more. That's what I can think.
I think my two Duolingo publications talk more about motivation and what factors encourage people to learn a language on their own in a self-directed fashion, and what is embedded in Duolingo to help foster their motivation, both extrinsic and intrinsic. Duolingo is very gamified and has a lot of extrinsic kinds of things. The feedback system, the leaderboards, the badges, all that is extrinsic motivation. It's not really intrinsic. But the use of the language that you've learned on a travel trip that you take to Japan is very intrinsic and volition related. So it's a bit of both. So you can gamify anything. Oh, well, not anything, but you can gamify a lot of environments to foster that extrinsic kinds of motivation if you want to. I'm not a big fan of gamification, but I've got 4 studies that we are looking at gamification. I got a dissertation student finishing a dissertation right now looking at gamification. So I'm interested in it. I'm more interested in the intrinsic kinds of things and how one creates meaningful, relevant, and authentic learning environments so as to foster more of a self-initiated learning environment. But I think between Garen's question and Arpita's question, for me, it's the degree of scaffolding, the amount of, and the timeliness of, and the genuineness of that support structure that's put into the environment, and whether those structures are mandated and exist as a required sequence that one goes through, or are there and options that are available, the supports, the hints, the structures, even the AI bots that might give some feedback, or the human, instructors. Embedding those supports can be just there. And then in most of these cases, most of the MOOCs, for instance, are now self-directed. There's no longer an instructor in these massive open online courses. They're all set up to start every day. Every day they have a cohort that goes through. In the old days, of 10 years ago or 5 years ago, in the old days, there was an instructor wrapped around it for many of them, maybe half of them. But that's really no longer the case. There may be a few exceptions to that. So now, given that there aren't instructors, what are they doing to provide this, to help these a higher percent finish them, or at least learn what they need to learn? Now, MOOCs and many open education resources are not there to be finished. They're there to participate in. They're there to learn a section of or a module of. So the learning goals have changed. And now the last 2 weeks in this class, we've talked about micro-credentials. As people move to smaller and smaller bits and learning a couple of modules in a course and getting a micro-credential, does that change the way we structure these environments in terms of the motivational components or items? Does this change our guidelines when we're moving towards smaller bit learning? It probably does to some degree. And I think that as we continue that movement towards micro-credentials and micro schools and micro this and that, I think that, we'll be addressing different types of motivation and different types of goals and plans for those goals. It's no longer a goal of getting a master's degree. It's no longer a goal of getting her EDD or doctorate. The goals are a lot smaller in terms of the completion components of what is completion. So, for hundreds of years, we've been educating people with this notion of having to complete something and get a degree from it. As we move to greater and greater resources at our fingertips, it's no longer a degree that people want, but knowledge and being able to participate in a culture successfully, maybe to obtain a job, to get involved in a network, to have connections to get a job. That's my son just got a new job at US Soccer Foundation. He's expecting to get lots of connections from that. That's today's world. It's all about connections. It may not be about what you know in your brain, but about what connections you have. It goes back to the connectivism theory, right? Or the situated learning theories out there. So all these questions about scaffolding, about motivation, about self-directed learning are changing, and I think it's difficult for all of us to wrap our heads around where that change is headed. It's difficult for us to wrap our heads around the results that Meina and I have had when we're kind of interested, at least I am, I think speaking for Meina too, we're interested in where learning's going. and not learning from 20 years ago, which is most of education set up to reify the learning from a decade ago, 2 decades ago, 3 decades ago, 4 decades ago, when we're in a plane, living in a planet that is changing dramatically in terms of the expectations for learners and the jobs that are available to us. And that's causing a conundrum for many people in how they think about education, how they think about motivation, and whether they need to be extrinsically or intrinsically motivated. I think that in the long run, Arpita, and I hope that it's going to be not the extrinsic things that are as important, but the intrinsic ones as we move through the society. If we're getting learning in such small bits, if everything's going to be extrinsic, why don't we just be robots? I mean, why don't we just be bots? And I'm hoping that more of the focus will be on the intrinsic part of learning as we move to smaller and smaller knowledge bits being important. Maybe I'm an optimist. Maybe I'm an optimist. Meina, I've talked a lot. I'm on my soapbox today, as you notice. Okay, so Meina, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I totally agree with what Dr. Bonk said about the motivation. Yeah.
So we do have an article, Meina and I have, on MOOC instructor motivation and professional development. We have both. We've published maybe a dozen, maybe 15 things. So before Meina left, actually that year she left, 2019, we had a bunch of things come out that year, the year before and the year after. Personalization of MOOCs, cultural sensitivity in them, and other topics. The Shelbys, Amanda, take it away, Amanda.
I know. I was just I asked a question as a follow-up to Garen, but Garen's question verbally clarified the direction he was going. The written question I misunderstood. But I 100% agree with what you just stated. I guess one of my larger frustrations, perhaps even with this program, but more so just raising children in high school and experiencing educational strategies, throughout my career and employment, switching employments, is that there's such a push for that piece of paper, which I get is important at some point, but my motivation in pursuing these events and educational opportunities, I would say even degree, obviously in this situation, is to do better at my job, which I shared the purpose specifically in there. And that's the real motivator, because I've signed a Hippocratic oath to protect the public, people, and pets, and through, the care of pets. So veterinary care, healthcare. And so that's my motivation. And I get frustrated that people will say, well, what grade are you getting? Or, what degree do you have that says you can do whatever? And I'm like, that's important, but you should really care about my motivation to pursue improvement. And if that improvement is successful in the workplace. So I agree with everything you said.
As my dog's barking upstairs, Oliver needs. So I agree with you, Amanda, that, it's not just people, it's the pets around us too, right? Improvement, growth. I'm a human development person. I had double majored in human development and human learning. And I thought eventually, sometime in my life, early on, it's all about human learning, my research. At some point in my life, I'm going to switch to look at human development. And I'm kind of doing that. I'm looking at how people's lives change from the open access to these technologies. And I hope my next book will move beyond my world is open book to the world is wide open. I interview people whose lives have changed as a result of having different avenues to learn with technology, particularly. And I want to highlight there's so many different ways in which people are learning today. So many opportunities to learn and share that learning and improve and share your improvements, that we can open up the lens a bit and help everyone out and accept this tunnel focus, just tunnel focus on one reason to learn, to get the silly degree thing. There's so many other reasons why. Just self-esteem, just your self-respect. That's probably and self-improvement. To me, those are the most important things. And freedom to learn is our research shows, and my early research in open education resources is people want freedom. They don't want, as soon as you start assessing them for learning from a MOOC or learning from open education, they want out. They want an environment for once in their life where they're not being assessed by the outside, by the man out there. They want some personal, they want to move into an area on their own and find something that's meaningful to them without having to have this extra baggage over the top and live their lives as self-motivated human beings. I'm going on now. Virginia put her video on. She might want to talk, but Maria has a question. Maria, you want to ask the question?
Yeah, it's just, and I know you K-12 is not the focus here, but I just assume there's such a big gap or between what people, students are capable, even like high schoolers in versus the college students or the expectation even like there's absolutely no way I could think of just allowing my students go fully online. It's just because they still, and it's a culture in America that's grades driven, like they want that diploma, they want to graduate, and everybody's just telling them, you know, you need this and this and this class to graduate high school. And I think that's the big issue. So I'm not sure if it's a question or not, but do you think it's like that sign of maturity when the students finally realize that they need some of the classes for skill versus like that, because that skill will take them further, versus like they just need this class to graduate and forget about it? And is this like part of this motivation, like to get them to actually go online and do some of that self-directed learning? Like
Instrumental reasons versus personal volition reasons. No, K-12 is very much alive and well in this class. This is a class about learning environments, and that includes K-12, includes informal, and includes, you know, governmental or training. All environments are, you know, are important in here. We don't have enough time to, in 15 weeks, to address all the issues, but I'm seeing increasingly all the alternative schools out there that don't have the same model that we're accustomed to. Whether that will, you know, and my podcast show, Silver Lining for Learning, we've emphasized that, including this past week with folks in India that are changing schools and school systems to enable students to have more choice in their K-12 school experiences and how it's making an impact across youth in India. It's called Quest Alliance. We had Quest Alliance folks on this past weekend, and you can watch the show. You just go to Silver Lining for Learning. Well, we've had 5, 6, 7 different episodes with innovative schools in India alone, let alone.
Yeah, I remember that the Beyond 8 schools. I watched that one. Yeah.
Right, and they were my guests in here a couple, you know, in week 2 or week 3 or somewhere early in the semester. That's another one. So, but there's folks, we've had shows from Australia, China, New Zealand, and other countries around the world that are similar from Brazil, you know. So it's happening not just in the US, it's happening around the world, and there is change occurring in the K-12 space. But you're right, how do we help the students understand the instrumental focus and putting up with things? And you might have some perpetual boredom in some classes and inspiration in others, but you have to survive both in order to succeed in this world. You have to be able to, you know, I'm an accountant. If anyone can put up with instrumental learning, it's me, you know. I mean, you know, just spend 1 week as an accountant, you'll understand why I'm happy to be something else. But, you know, I had to take cost accounting, take financial accounting, consolidations, taxation. You want to talk about instrumental learning to the nth degree and memorizing crap and being uninspired? So, or read my articles about how the accounting curriculum needs to change and how we can help instructors move towards a different model of teaching it. And that's the first thing I did when I became an academic. We did several papers on changing the accounting curriculum to be in line with what we're talking about here in terms of motivating students. So I've suffered through. I've also tried to address it in my own work, how curriculum can change. I'm very happy to share pieces with anyone who asked me, because one of them took 8 years to publish. Okay, so imagine an article that took 8 years to get published, and you know, at the end, you want people to read it in the Journal of Accounting Education, that was, which was top tier journal in accounting, but the accountants weren't ready for it, right? So, but if we can get that accepted, if we can get accountants to understand the need to change their model, anything's possible. On the other hand, so I can talk out of both sides of my mouth. The boring side, or the excited for the future side. I'm talking too much. Meina's got slides to show. Does anyone have Meina, do you have any comments on what I just said? I'm sorry, Meina.
Well, I think I agree with what you said. Yeah, I don't have any additional comments on that.
Does anyone have, we can take one or two more before Meina goes through some slides. Virginia, you put on your camera. I'm sure you've got a comment, and Wing has as well. So how about we go to those two of you, and then we go to Meina's slides. Virginia.
Hi. Well, I put on my camera because I'm finally settled because I was driving from work and on my phone. But yeah, to the point that Garen made on the chat just a few minutes ago about transfer and how it's more important than just internal learning. But it makes me think about how most macro learning or established degrees focus on just the theory. You learn all of these things, but then when you go out to get a job, you don't really know how to do things. So it makes me wonder about just the system that we have in place. And on the other hand, thinking about online teaching, like I used to teach Spanish online, and my course was required for mostly seniors. And I did a lot of self-directed learning, and we had Zoom meetings to practice and all of that. But then the amount of reports that I had to file for unauthorized use of AI and just cheating in general, just makes me makes me wonder the role of motivation. And I don't know, I think I spent a lot of time just designing the course and making sure that it was interesting and fun for the students and all that. But then on the other hand, just the lack of reward on the other side from the perspective of the instructor was very frustrating.
So you're managing learning and learners because the system is requiring you to manage and look for being a cheating detective as opposed to a facilitator of learning. And that's the unfortunate part of today's system. I think that's what you're saying.
Yeah, I don't know where I'm going with this, but yeah, I don't know. Just things that I was thinking about as I was listening.
That could be research. That's a researchable topic. And, Christian's agreeing with me there, that would be a fascinating area to research, is the system controls put in place to monitor and be, big brother in effect, as, in this age, especially of AI, generative AI and resource abundance. How do we create structures that aren't so top down, vindictive, instrumental, and be more facilitative? I don't know. I'm just thinking aloud here.
Yeah.
Wing, you're nodding your head. Christian, you're nodding your head. I know Christian's has a comment. He's got 5 comments. Christian, I'll let you make one comment before Wing talks. Go ahead, Christian.
Great to see you, Meina, and to hear about all of the exciting work that you've been doing, and how impactful it will be in better understanding AI's integration into teaching modalities. Thank you.
And everyone here, please give it up for Christian. He just passed his day 2 quals. He doesn't know about day 1, but day 2, big applause for Christian and his committee question last Friday. So I had 5 people go through committee. I don't think anyone else in here, but all 5 people passed. So if you are worried about quals, lately students are doing very well. There's forming study groups. Their EDD students form study groups, and they work together, and they, support each other. And, I'm seeing a lot higher success rate as we get more and more experience in it. So day 2 is a personal paper they write that might lead to a dissertation, 4,000-word paper on a topic that they select. So self-directed learning, in effect, for 30 days. Wing.
Hi. Okay. My question is related to the self-directed learning. is okay. Oftentimes that we as for adult learners, we need a lot of freedom, like we mentioned earlier. But at the same time, if we go too much, give too much freedom, I mean lack of structure, give a lot of scaffolding, so we aimed at nowhere. So how to balance in between? Yeah, so that they have enough motivation, persistence, at the same time achievement. Thank you.
Meina, do you have any ideas there? And Wing's coming from Singapore, just so you know.
Glad to see you, Wayne. I think this is a wonderful question. I think so. So as an instructor, you should balance the autonomy of the learners and also the structure of the course. Even in massive open online courses, there are some courses they do give you flexibility regarding how long you can finish the MOOC, but they also help you set the deadline. So they may say that maybe in 1 month you will finish this course, but if you couldn't finish it, you can reset the deadline to another month. So I think to some extent having a deadline helps learners, and then but also don't be too strict. This is just one example. And also, for example, in some online courses, you could have structure regarding the top the assignments format, but you can give more autonomy for learners for them to select the topic that relate to their personal life and also their current or future job. These are just some strategies that possibly could be used in online setting. Dr. Bonk may have more to add.
So my entire career has been spent around this question in a way, I have two different answers to this question. When I was a doctoral student, we were trying to create support structures in writing, facilitated prompts to help students think more creatively and more critically about what they're writing and get involved in basically writing as thinking and reflection and all that. And since that time, Dr. Reynolds was our guest last week. He and I were building these things. Since that time, I think every few years, I've been testing tools or designing tools that would foster student learning to some degree. And those are facilitative tools, but they're in an environment with a set environment. They don't allow for unlimited freedom. They're constrained by the current system that we have in place. And so as I reflected on it, I got to West Virginia University, my first job. And I think the first thing that I did at West Virginia, I just wrote down a lot of different ideas on a piece of paper. And I don't know if I ever told Meina this. I had this model that I was working on, the difference between the freedom side and chaos, and what you're saying is, yeah, we can offer freedom to learn, but at what point does it become chaos? At what point do we not do any justice to help students to learn? It just becomes so messy of an environment. What are the supports that we put in so as we don't have anarchy happening, but yet we have some freedom to learn within these environments? What are the structures? What are the technology tool structures, as well as the psychology principles, the structures built by them, whatever the principles of learning that you abide by? And I think this is a constant dilemma for educators. And today it becomes even more of a dilemma as the resources proliferate out there and the avenues for learning, the delivery mechanisms also increase. That creates this tension that we all have in terms of turning on the tap and letting people explore MOOCs and let them explore OpenCoursera from MIT and all these open learning forums that are out there, right? And maybe have a community of learners. You have Christian in your community of learning and others that might help you provide that window into their view of what this thing is that we're learning today. So the peer base is dramatically changed from when I went to college. It was just the kids that down the street in Wisconsin, they all went to University of Wisconsin Whitewater together. Today, the internet enables us to learn with anybody around the world whenever we want to learn with them. So you know, that's another factor in this equation. It's no longer constrained by just my friends at Nathan Hale High School decided to go to Whitewater with me. You know, we knew who was all going to be there. We weren't surprised by our classmates. They, you know, the graduate school that Christian goes to at Indiana is only maybe got one student from Indiana in the class, and the rest are from all part, and very few from the USA, all parts of the world, all out there. So, you know, the environments that we're learning within, and even at the K-12 level, Maria, you know, you can get your students doing e-pals projects with other kids around the world and sharing them and building on them, and so that component has changed dramatically, and that puts us into a situation where it's harder to predefine the learning environment. It's harder to create the model. So in the old days, Charlie Regulus' green book, structural design book, which I have sitting behind me, he has traditional instructional design books. There's lockstep. You do this, you do this, you do this, you do this. That's the way IST was. It was all behavioral models or cognitive psychology. It was a combined cognitive, you know, behavioral models. And it's all lockstep. And then it was easier, Wing, to design the learning environments for preset notions of the outcomes. It was all behaviorally based. Now we're opening things up, and it's more difficult to predetermine those outcomes. And so the environmental models are changing. And the scale of that learning can be changed with MOOCs and other kinds of things. I'm going well beyond your question, but your question's a great one. And it's something I've been wrestling with for decades. And I had this model, I never published it. I had this idea, and I wish I may have saved it somewhere. I'll try and look for it. But I was designing something that would kind of get at and poke at when do we go into chaos? And when do we go to too much control? And how do we design those environments? Does anyone have a comment on that comment? Go ahead, Christian. I know you're dying for this.
No, I think that I would just veer us off into something slightly different, but I think workplace learning is my real interest. And I mean, it's been touched on a couple of times in a couple of the questions here, talking about learning in fast-paced work environments. It really is, you have to be self-directed to continue your lifelong learning. And what do we have to help enable successful lifelong learning? And so I think AI is a potential tool that we can use. But
so workplace is community practice. What is a community practice? Read E.T. and Wenger, Lave and Wenger, which is your Qualls question. Or we go to Maria with K-12 or higher ed, we're into communities of learners. There's a difference between communities of learners and communities of practice, but there's overlap as well. And I've written on that, an article that came out in 2004. I'd be happy to share with everyone how we can create communities of practice or communities of learning. What are the principles that go into an effective community of learners, if you will? And people have been studying that in IST as for their dissertations since the late 90s, you know, and Christian's going to study it here shortly when he starts on it. So in part, we have to think about what is a community learner at the K-12 level and how do we foster those communities, but yet not break the system so that you're still addressing the outcomes that the state wants or that the school district wants. I think one model out there, Maria, you might want to look at is called the Foxfire method. Foxfire method is, you know, Foxfire is like the moss that grows on dead trees, and they're trying to get, you know, think about students who, you know, or in classrooms that are dead, to have them grow through self-initiated learning by writing books and writing stories and having these stories and books on display in dentist's office and other places, and having them study the local community and interview people in the local community for their work. So Foxfire was created in Georgia, northern Georgia. Fascinating model or method out there, but there are other ones like it. But Foxfire will get you to think about what can we do within the constraints of K-12 systems and the state outcomes that are mandated, and yet have the freedom to have students learn project-based or problem-based how they want to learn. It's a marry between the two sides, if you will. There are other examples of it, but that might provide you a glimpse of what might go into something you try and do with your students. Meina, we should go to your slides or you'll never get them in here. Why don't you take 15 minutes maximum? I know it might rush you a little bit, and then we'll take a few questions and maybe end by 5:30 and we can get everyone a break here. Is that okay, Meina? Do you have your baby? I know is waiting for, she has a 1-year-old girl named Alice that was born last August. Is Alice okay?
Yeah, she is fine now. Can you see my slides, Dr. Bonk?
Yep, we can.
Okay, I think I will I will very quickly go through the slides because right now we have 15 minutes limit.
It'll take 20 if you need
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
So because this course is related to learning environment, as Dr. Bonk told me, these 2 weeks is more related to online learning. So I would like to share 2 studies I conducted with my colleagues related to online learning research, especially from instructors' perception, and also how to facilitate collaboration in online learning environment.
So Meina, mention who your colleagues are.
So I will introduce right now. So one of the study is about medical and public health instructor perceptions of online teaching. This was conducted during the pandemic. My colleague, she was the lecturer in at Wayne State at that time, but right now she is not here. So we had this paper published in ENIT in 2022, and another study I conducted with my colleague, Dr. Curt, who is my colleague in my program. We conduct study related to how to promote collaboration in online problem-based learning environment. We use the educational design research approach, and this article was published 2023.
So just let me add to that. Dr. Cao Zhang is now at Kennesaw State, running a center, and she is the co-author of my book, Empowering Online Learning. If you have heard of my R2D2 model, read, reflexes, display, and do, Dr. Cao Zhang and I created that model. So there's some overlap there. I just wanted to point that out. If anyone's interested, I'm happy to share more later.
Yeah, she is a very supportive colleague.
Very smart colleague, yeah, and supportive.
And then, so the reason for conducting these 2 studies is because of the rapid growth of online learning. I will not talk too much about background here because of the time limitation. However, there are some challenges regarding student engagement, as some of you mentioned, and collaboration and technology adoption. So this 2 studies explore instructor perceptions and students' collaborations in online environment. For the first study, the background is specifically during the pandemic, the shift to online learning and in medical and public health area. There are some technology challenges in typical online learning, for example, some unstable network infrastructure, and also pedagogical challenges related to how to facilitate social interaction and communication and develop, like some of you mentioned about assessment online, it's very challenging. And also, especially in medical school, there's a missing hands-on component, possibly in online setting. So in this research, we aim to explore medical and public health instructor online teaching acceptance in higher education through using the technology acceptance model that are developed by these 2 authors in 2000. 2 research questions were asked in this research study. First is about their perceptions of usefulness of online teaching. The second is related to ease of use of teaching online. The third is related to their strategies of teaching online. We conducted a qualitative exploratory interview study design. We use this design, and then its context is in Midwest University, and then the participants were instructors who are teaching online undergraduate or graduate courses in fall 2020. We collected data through some instructor interview via Zoom. This is detailed information of the participants. Most of them have like around more than 4 or 5 years teaching experiences, and they have PhD or DNP degrees. these are their subject area. And then from this study, we analyzed the data use semantic analysis. We found that for perceived usefulness, they mentioned about learning objectives and also assessment and also instructional methods and student learning experience. For perceived ease of use, they mentioned related two categories, primarily technology aspects and also pedagogical aspects of ease of use. Regarding their online teaching experiences, they talk about how they teach the lecture-based courses and clinical and lab sessions. The key findings from this study is that for the usefulness, they think like learning objectives are almost the same, except occasional compromising of practical-based components. So Laura, in health education data, if you look at my online classes and my in-person classes in Canvas, you would see that they look almost identical. The activity will change slightly. So they think like online teaching could achieve the same kind of learning objectives as in-person teaching. Just however, Victoria mentioned that a lot of our objects require psychomotor learning. For our clinical practice involves outpatient understanding of texture, description of word grossly with the naked eyes was able to see that then to be translated into virtual world. Yeah, so only the practical-based part is primarily compromising online teaching. Regarding instructional strategies, instructors they adjusted in the online learning environment, which they included interactive lessons and a well-structured online course. So Megan mentioned that I try to create interactive lectures that are recorded so I can stop and have them answer questions during the pre-recorded lesson for marks. So that's a strategy they used. For the assessments, they have concerns as some of you mentioned during the prior conversation, how to prevent online cheating and testing hands-on skills. Some of the instructors, they did adjustment of like using open book test design, like Ben mentioned. I think the best way to avoid them cheating with an online exam would be give them an open book test, give them a test that encourages the use of the notes. So that they don't have to worry about they cheat in online settings. And in learning regarding the usefulness is learning experience wise, they think like online teaching can provide more flexibility for learners. Students can learn at any time and location and rewatch the videos when they have time. They primarily use a combination of synchronous and asynchronous sessions. As Victoria said, a type of modified classroom, the flipped classroom methodology going forward, where I would have, all my lectures already been recorded. So she used the flipped approach, let students to watch the recorded lecture ahead of time, and in the synchronous session, she can have the discussion with students, discussion session. Regarding ease of use, the technology perspective, they all mentioned that the technology were quite easy, even though they have the challenge of use certain technology at the beginning, but they quickly got how to use them. Pedagogic perspective is quite challenging for engaged learners online for most of the faculty. Some of them, they use strategies. For example, they can let students to turn on the camera or if possible, or at some points if students actively participate in the online class. For another key finding related to a third research question is the strategy they use. In synchronous sessions, they use the live lectures with recordings and discussions, and also provide office hours for learners. Some of them use the online labs because in medical school they may have the labs. They purchase some like kind of online lab software for students to use. And flipped online teaching is one of the strategies they use. For asynchronous sessions, they primarily provided recorded lectures using online discussion, provide mini videos with embedded assessments to check students' understanding, and also delivering online survey to follow up with students' learning needs and learning progress, and also provide students timely ongoing feedback for asynchronous sessions. For the clinical and lab sessions are important part in medical and public health education. So for the lab, some of the instructors send material to students' home and so that student can work on the hands-on project and record videos after they finish that, or they have virtual reality and simulation tools for students to use virtually. For clinical session, the instructors they collaborate with the clinical preceptor in hospital for clinical session during the pandemic. So this study is conducted during pandemic. So the strategies typically applied to that situation. So this study finding indicated instructors encountered challenges of using technology in initial stage, but they learned the use of technology quickly. Especially instructors perceived the use of online teaching confirm that subject norm influence perceived usefulness, because in that kind of situation, there's no other choice. They have to teach online or remotely. Fostering interaction with students during online teaching was a major challenge for instructors. This also concurred with a recent study conducted by prior researchers like Rose and other researchers. So thus online technology, regularly online meeting and meaningful learning tasks were suggested. The last especially for medical and public health education, they require the lab and clinical sessions. So blended model in the reality will be more applicable to this field, not purely online. The COVID pandemic is a special situation. I still have a few minutes. I will quickly go through the second study. This study is about collaboration in online problem-based learning. I will pass the background. So this study was aims to
Meina,
document.
why don't you go ahead and give us the little background? We've got time. If it takes 10 minutes, it's okay.
Oh, okay. I want to make sure everybody can have time to have break. So this study was also conducted during COVID, and then because a lot of us teach online and engaging online students is very challenging, problem-based learning is one of the solutions for that. Because usually in problem-based learning, it involves identifying problem, collect data, analyze data, negotiating with group members, and reflect and present the results. So group members typically they encounter challenges such as social loafing. So this study is talking about how to encourage students to collaborate effectively, efficiently in online setting. The study aimed to document and critically analyze the first circle of our education design research and examine the impact of group contracts and peer evaluation in supporting collaborative learning, online problem-based learning, and also explore students' perceptions of their learning experiences. There are two research questions guided this study. First, how did the group contract and peer evaluation support student online collaborative learning in PBL? The second is related to what challenges did students encounter in online collaborative learning? The research method, as I mentioned, is EDR. It was an online graduate level course at a public university. It was conducted in 2021. It's kind of also during pandemic. Here I would like to briefly introduce the instructional design component in this course. This is the user experience design for learning course. And then in this course, there are course participation elements, assignments, and interaction with instructor. For course participation, in this course, we have online engagement points, and in the assignments there assignments like learning product analysis, learning design problem description, and design. They will design their project and sketch their ideas, create personas and scenarios and storyboard, and then they will have to create prototype for their product. And here, individual I means individual assignment, G means group assignment. So most of the assignments in this course is group assignments. That's why we try to examine how to make sure the group collaboration is effective. And then there are certain individual assignments, for example, sketches of design idea. the way of designing this assignment as individual project is because it's important for learners to sketch as many design ideas as possible before they can finalize their eventually final design. In this course, we also have the interaction with the instructors. We have online office hours every week, and has all hallway conversation in discussion forum. Students can post their questions regarding the week and the entire course anytime during in the hallway conversation canvas. And also, they will offer communication with instructors through email or scheduling individual meetings. So for participants of this course are the non-UX design course learning students. These are their background. Most of them are master students in the program. Two of them are PhD students. These are their professional background. They have very diverse background. Some are in health areas, some are in K-12 area or corporate settings. So for data analysis, data sources, we use the student course evaluation and student evaluation of peers. So in this course, students have to provide evaluation to their peers after every of their group assignments. And the evaluation will based on their student peers participation contribution of the project. And then students will have the final reflection survey at the end of the course. And then there's a group contract that they have to sign up at the beginning of the course, and also this student instructor reflection. For data analysis, this was used inductive content analysis. So for research question 1 regarding whether a group contract helps them, the group contract they stated helps them with discussion and consider diverse aspects in their group collaboration, such as their communication approach, frequency of meetings, and individual group members' contributions and roles. For example, one Group B's contract indicated if we have a disagreement about how to approach part of the project, we could each show facts or reasons why we feel a certain way to help others understand. Additionally, in situation of disagreement, we can move forward by voting. Like in this class, students are encouraged to form a group of at least around 3 to 4 students, because at least they have to have 3 students, because if there are 2 students in a group, if they do peer evaluation, they will definitely know who evaluate, give them a lower score or higher score. So that's the purpose, intentional design of the group collaboration. And then Jane also expressed the group contract help them communicate and help them create shared goals in the reflection survey. As she said, there are a few things that I believe went well in my group collaboration. We were effective communicators. We had a shared goal, as she mentioned in the comments. There are some challenges. First is group formation. The number of students and group changes. One of the students who had a change in group members shared the issues he encountered in the peer evaluation. So he said, I wish we could have studied together rather than shuffling groups after start. And also there's a lack of information about other students' skills and strengths before forming the group. Henry suggested, I think what should have been helpful is a list of skills and times available prior to even selecting team members. We all work and find a regular meeting schedule is very difficult. So in this course, students were encouraged to form a group by themselves. So some of them were not familiar with each other. They don't know who their peers are and their strengths. So this is kind of a challenge for students. So in this study, we found that group contracts really help students work smoothly and keep our goals focused on collaborative learning in PBL. This supports the conclusion by Frank and Schaff conducted a study in 2013. Another finding is that students' life events may influence the group collaboration process, even though students in this study handled that well, but they also have some life event. This success can be attributed to creating a group contract that help them think through different situations in group collaboration process. Regarding group formation, as suggested by prior researcher from Curt and Xunge, this study found that instruction could facilitate group formation process in collaborative work. So for peer evaluation, most students lack their group members and evaluated peer highly. which this can possibly reduce free rider issues and keep learners engaged. Another thing is that in group collaboration, selecting the appropriate tool or instrument is critical. The reason to talk about this is because in this study we found because they have to use Figma and other technology tools, but then the Figma free version, they don't have the collaboration function for them to work together. That's a challenge that students also encountered in this course and study. So based on these two studies, we came up with the basic design principle for online learning teaching. First is balancing student autonomy and instructor facilitation or intervention in group formation. That's what we discussed. That's what a question came up in the chat window previously. We talked about how to balance autonomy and instructor's structure. The second is encouraging group goal setting and constant reflection through group contract or other approaches. The third principle is providing opportunity for peer feedback in collaborative learning online. And the fourth is considering accessibility, affordability, and cost benefits of technology use for group collaboration. So
Can you stop here, Meina?
Yeah, this is the end of the presentation.
So let's leave it on this slide for a second, because this is the most highly applicable. This course is not designed learning environment. And many people were mentioning the upper left one, balance, structure, facilitation, those two components. Does anyone in here have a comment on this slide or on the previous part of our presentation? Or would like to pose a question for Meina on this? Arpita has a comment anyhow. Arpita.
Yeah, I really like the idea of a group contract, and I was resonating it with, with my organization. So we created accountability groups after EQ sessions, and we have observed much but better engagement and skill application when there is a community, a learning circle, and people are reflecting what they have used, what worked, what didn't work. So I think I really liked that idea of a group contract. So yeah, thank you. An excellent presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for the comments. Yeah, in this group contract, they have in this design that they have to sign the group contract at the beginning of the course before they start their group project, and also in the middle of the semester, they were asked to reflect as a group of their group collaboration, and then if there's something didn't went well, then they have to think about strategy to address that. And at the end, they have a reflection. So in this course design, we embedded the student like self-regulated learning skills into the course, like let them set their learning goals and reflect their learning and monitor their learning process. Thank you for the comment.
Now, I had a question for these group formation for group exercises. This is something I work with a lot with the university I work at. Is that these the and in these studies were they looking at groups that, because there's a difference. There are groups where people are forced into group learning, where learning the material is not dependent on a social exchange. And the performance is not dependent on social. So basically, the authenticity is did they measure the alignment of authenticity of both the learning and the expected anticipated performance? Were all these groups? See, what I'm trying to say is you can study those that are well aligned and those that are malaligned in either direction. And then you can group them all together, in which case it washes it out, creates more noise in the data. So I'm wondering, do you know in these that made the group comparisons, and or were they looking at the aligned groups, or was it just pretty much all put into a big pool and thus containing substantial noise?
So I want to make sure that I understand your question. So you see whether the group that they were aligned with their performance?
Yeah, when we do a group, when we do a learning group, we design a group activity.
Yeah.
There ought to be a purpose for it besides just saying we're going to add a social component, because we add the social component, we increase extraneous load, and we're not going to eliminate that. Now, sometimes there's a reason to have that extraneous load, because that extraneous load is part of our jobs. We have to work in these groups, in these teams. Think of pilots, two pilots working together. Might as well have them in their learning environment together because they're going to be in that environment, so we have good transfer. So, but sometimes what we have is we have learning groups where we have just all captains. I come from an aviation background. So we have all captains, and then we have all the first officers over here. But then their performance is together, and we wonder why their performance is a little wonky. So I'm wondering is when I see somebody that we're talking about making assumptions and inferences about group formation, are we basing those upon studies that looked at these well-aligned instructional group? They're learning authentically in a group because they're going to be authentically performing in a group, or just those where we group everyone together. We're going to have a group math activity, but they're just learning basic math.
That's a really wonderful question. I think especially in our field, most of people who may work as instrument designer, or like in higher education or in corporate settings, they all involve group collaboration.
Okay.
For example, as instrument designers, then you don't have the expertise in the content knowledge. You have to work with the faculty members or the knowledge experts in this field on the project. Also, you have to work with the project manager. So as long as I know, most of the instructors, they don't work individually. They have to work with the group, and then project management skills is one of the key skills for graduates in our field too. That's
Okay.
important to work on it. So some of the students in my courses, they also complain, oh, I want to work individually, but then group collaboration skill and communication skill is one of the skills that they have to learn, even though they don't.
Perfect.
Well, yeah, that's
Okay, thank you.
Yep, good point. Arpita.
I have two questions. One is like Karen was talking about the group dynamic, sort of a group dynamic issue that comes up. So does it help to have a rubric in advance that you share with the group? And second is, what is the role of the instructional designer so that the group kind of effectively, they work together? How do we design that, group in an effective way? And my second question is about self-directed learning. So like in my organization, we have a very traditional learning management system where people go and access all learning resources. So when people want something in the moment of need, that they want to access something, so what are the other effective methods that can help learners access resources in the moment of need instead of going to an LMS? So yeah, my two questions. Thank you.
a wonderful question. For the first question is about whether there are rubrics for their collaboration, whether they are effectively right, and the guidelines. So in this design, so we at the beginning of the course, we have the guideline for students how to work effective as a group. So at the beginning, we know there are some strategy you can use to help with your group collaboration. If there's some conflicts in the group, how you should address these kind of issues. We did have a guideline for the rubric. We did have the kind of and also at the beginning, we have the kind of group collaborations have different categories, how you can evaluate whether this group collaboration is effective or not. That's that's the midterm. We also have the midterm, like in the middle of the semester, they can evaluate their group effective by themselves. So that's the rubric that we give them in the middle of the semester. I think these are the strategies that we use in this study. Maybe there are more some other different strategies, but this is a count that we had that in the course. And also in the group collaboration in this course, students' grades are also sometimes we don't say that we shouldn't talk too much about grades, but still students care about that. So their group collaboration, their peer evaluation influence their final grades too. That's why they take the peer evaluation very seriously. That can kind of have the extrinsic motivation for them to work in a group. For the second question about resources that learners can use, except besides the traditional LMS, I don't know. There's a lot of free online resources like Massive or Coursera or edX. They could possibly be helpful. And also some like there's some YouTube channels that focus on education, possibly could be used for learning. Maybe Dr. Bonk has more comments or suggestions, but I'm not aware of.
I want to focus on Amanda's question, if it's okay with you, Meina. Did we lose Meina?
Oh, sure.
You're there. Okay. So, Amanda, you want to ask your question?
Are you referring to my comment about motivation?
Yeah, the side comment.
Yeah, it was a side tangent to a very small part of, I feel like, earlier discussion and some maybe somewhat aligned with some of your presentation, especially that last slide when I saw like cost associated, things affordable, accessible, etc. I find that at times, if something is free, people don't usually follow through and complete or don't do it with the same vigorous effort. And I find professionally, if I charge someone a small amount to attend a course, whether it be asynchronous, in my industry, that the actual performance and effort that they put into completing the course tasks improves to whatever degree. And I'm just wondering if the rest of you find that across your industries.
I agree with you. That's what some of the strategy we did is that actually because I told Dr. Bonk, I had a USD funded project this summer, and then we wanted to give free to all the students to attend our camp. But we know that if it's free, they may feel like it's like they didn't really value that. So we kind of, if they finish it, we can return like refund their money, but they have to, when they register, they have to pay a certain small amount of money, not too much, but also like let them know that it's not totally free. That's I think in massive open core online courses, they are also not totally free currently. There are some universities they charge like $50 or $30 of certificates, that kind of fee. It's kind of free, but also you have to pay a little bit if you want to get a certificate. I agree with your observation. Dr. Bonk may want to add something more.
So, yeah, discussion here is evolving in my brain as we talk. We hear this over and over again, your argument, and it is true. Just to the degree we talk about effort, we talk about mental energy. That is true that you put a cost or label a cost, at least on the front end, that could be reimbursed, as Meina pointed out. But once we do that, once we saddle people with a potential cost, you're going to disenfranchise some people who won't even bother to explore it. So it's a quandary. It's another one of these quandaries that we have, between the world that's open and opening things up and the world that we're conditioned to that's very closed. Is there a halfway point somewhere in between? So it depends here, and it depends always is a good answer, right? I was once on New Zealand television. I didn't have that answer. It depends, and I look like a fool. So always keep that in your back pocket. It depends. It depends on your goals. It depends on the stakeholders and the funding agencies. Maybe it depends on what your supervisors want. So, if you're trying to impress people that everyone who signed up completed it, well, then you might have to put a cost behind it. If you're trying to impress people with the broadest population and participation possible all around the world, no cost is probably the best option. So it depends on what you're trying to do and what you're attempting to do and where it fits in the general scheme of things. If it's in a degree program, you probably should have some cost component to that degree program. You notice when you get all the EDD students, when you get to pass your quals, you're going to be charged a small fee to keep you in the EDD program, even though it might take you a few years to finish your doctorate. It's just a minor amount of money. Maybe it's not for some of you, but it's considered a minor amount of money, and that is a motivator to maintain your eligibility and status. So we see this notion exhibited around the world in every educational setting and sector. However, when you are trying to create an interest in an area or an awareness for an area where it maybe have been limited in the past, you don't want to put a cost factor on it initially, or try to avoid doing so as to open the spigot up as wide as possible. And how do we do that? Maybe with stories and testimonials of others who have gone through it, or role models and that kind of thing, without having the cost factor, or examples of what happened last year, all these other things, best practices, exemplars, all these other ways in which to motivate people into it. Or you go back to the gamification side, the leaderboards and all that, to get people on, even though they didn't pay anything, they might get on the leaderboard and might get a badge from it. Well, there are other motivators out there, I'm pointing out. And so the way in which we motivate, through money or not through money, monetary reasons or not monetary, may all depend on what it is you're trying to do and where it is within the general scheme of things. My answers have been kind of long tonight. I apologize for that, but I'm just thinking off the top of my head a little bit here. And you guys are asking great questions tonight. I'm sure Meina will agree with you. We're at time. Oh, I can do a final comment or question from anyone who wants to jump in, who hasn't had a chance to say anything. I know Randy got here a little bit late. She's in China. It's very early in the morning in China. And I know Amita didn't get a chance to say anything. Y'all didn't get a chance to. So if someone who hasn't spoken yet tonight would like to make a comment or pose a quick question, jump in.
I have a question, but it's not about self-directed learning, rather than it's about research. I don't know if it's okay to ask. So I know that a lot of people around the world are interested in conducting research. However, they have barriers. For example, they don't have IRB system, and or they have language barriers. So they want to collaborate with specialists and researchers from abroad. I wonder if these intrinsically motivated researchers or teachers, let's say, how can they collaborate effectively with their peers around the world? They have barriers even to the libraries or resources, as we said today. So that's what I was thinking during the presentation. Thank you.
Meina? Quick answer?
That's a great question. I'm not quite sure how I can answer this question, Dr. Bonk.
So I'm getting this all the time, and increasingly. I can't get away. I mean, at least every week I'm getting a request from a visiting scholar internationally to come visit here, or a request to do research collaboration with them. The internet is providing a forum for people to contact me, and so it's already happening, Amita. I mean, it's happening constantly. I can help only so many out. Last year I worked on 24 different research projects with other people, I mean, but that's helping 24 people. There's probably hundreds more. I mean, so there's only so much I can be stretched, and other faculty can be stretched, and that's beyond the expectations of my department. They want us to work internally with others here, with the students who are here. That's is working outside. So, I mean, you can form communities of practice and create Facebook groups or WeChat groups that share research findings and collaborate that way. You could have weekly one-off meetings in Zoom with a research network that you could form. You can form research networks or communities of practice to do that and have them be, labeled as this or that so people can join in on them. And those are things already exist. But you're going to have volunteer faculty members or staff members in higher education or government or nonprofit settings that will lead the effort if those people don't have the resources that you want now, or that you need, I should say. So, things like that may exist through UNESCO or United Nations or the World Bank, but I don't think so. Things like that may exist through different nonprofit agencies and so forth, these structures for a researcher network. Maybe look that up. Maybe I look up, researcher networks, or maybe start one up. You could take an initiative and maybe that could be your little baby, your little prize that, it's going to be Omita's International Researcher Collaboration. UIRC. And that's the UIRC. People are going to, subscribe to it, take a membership in, you create a newsletter around it. I don't know of existing networks, but that doesn't mean they don't exist in the hundreds. In the hundred, I would imagine that in small ways, they exist all over the place. Like I said, I was on 24, maybe 25 actually research projects last year. Those things exist and they're not documented. There's a lot of these things are happening. But please, if people ask you of someone to collaborate, don't give them my name. Please, no. I can't. That I've gone beyond my mental and physical capacity. I need some sleep sometimes, but it's interesting. Meina, I was going to ask you a final question. We have 1 minute left. What would you do differently in either of these studies? Or if you do a follow-up, what would the follow-up be? What area would you explore?
Mostly, as most people are very interested and really care about how can AI help with online learning in different aspects, like
Say that again. Say it in a different way. How can
how can AI support online teaching and learning?
Okay, so it's an Gen AI questions. Many questions on that. So you'd explore the AI version of this. Her studies were published in 2022 and 23. AI become hot in 2022. Her studies are already done. She's saying that if she was to revisit these studies, it would be the AI component of Gen AI component, which is part of the answer everyone is giving these days. I want to say 3 things here. Christian passed his quals. What I didn't mention, without revisions. All 5 people who took quals on the day 2 quals that Y graded passed without revisions. So that's a good thing. I don't want to spread that too far. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to say anything here. It's being recorded or whatever. I'm going to be reported if people pass. But anyhow, he did pass and he'll pass. Next week, we have Dabe Lee, who works at Kennesaw State with Dr. Ka Jong, who's on that project with Meina. Dr. Dabe Lee is an alum of IST. She and her husband they're both done at Kennesaw State. Yul Ha and Dabe Lee will show her chatbot for math problems chatbot, which was featured on Malcolm Gladwell's IBM podcast show earlier this year. It's a fascinating, show. Take a look at the syllabus and listen to the podcast. Her bot that she's produced is really interesting. So next week is a K-12 bot, so addressing Maria's issue is students in math, how to help them learn math. The following week will be two people who have developed bots in Canada and in Illinois. We'll hear from Ray Schroeder from the University of Illinois Springfield, who also writes for Inside Higher Education, and his bot. We'll hear from Ron Ostin from York University in Toronto, also for Contact North in Toronto, and their bots. So the next 2 weeks, we're going to hear from people who've developed AI bots. So this is going to be the end of this particular session. We're going to come back in 10 minutes or 15 minutes to hear from Dr. Christopher Foley from IU talk about what's happening in online learning space at IU. So Meina, let's give Meina a round of applause. Meina, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Everyone wave
Everyone.
Meina.
Thank you for
Thank you,
Bye.
Meina.
Have a good night.
So
Thank
week
you.
12, this is part 1. I'm going to stop the recording on this in a second, but thank you, Meina. It's great to have my colleague back in here and volunteering to help out in this class, R622 Fall, week 12, part 1.